Hello Whisky Curious, welcome to the Whisky Bothy. I'm Ralphie. I am the commentator, narrator and malt head that provides content on this channel, and I do it all on my own, so there's no reason not to get the party started. Always a good sign when just pour a wee glass. Not too much, by the way, don't be greedy. Don't be greedy. Bear in mind, you will never, ever, ever see a bottle of whisky with a use-by date on it. Because the fact is that, I predict people are going to open bottles of whisky in 500 years. I mean, these will be absolute antiquities, and a very high price will be paid simply for the age, because that's what people are buying. They're buying the rarity, the age. Despite the fact there's plenty of whisky available, and there always will be. In fact, alcohol occurs in nature constantly. There's a country in Africa which has what are called amarula trees. This is getting a bit distracted, but it won't take long. And the amarula trees attract elephants, because when the fruit is ripening, the fruit starts to ferment. And it basically means as the sugars are consumed by the yeasts from the skin of the fruit, it converts into alcohol. And it is well documented. I don't take my word for it. You can check it out for yourself with a quick AI search before it completely loses the plot. Can't be that far away. That elephants are found to be lying on the ground drunk from the consuming too many fruits, fermented fruits from the amarula tree. This is not amarula, this is Scotch single malt whisky, Longrow version. I can't say Longrow Distillery. There used to be a Longrow Distillery many generations ago, but not now. This is from Springbank Distillery, and it's not very often that I review this particular whisky, and this review happens to be review number 1130. So there you have it, point of reference. I've just poured a glass, I'm letting it sit, little bit of slow roly stroly, no nasty shaky shakies. And the reason I bought this is because I simply saw it on the shelf in the shop when I was in the shop, and I thought, when's the last time I saw that? Quite a number of years, over 10 years actually. So I immediately bought a bottle. This is Longrow 100 proof, non-age statement, single malt from Springbank Distillery, and this is batch number 2. You'll find information on the back. Batch number 2. It is natural colour, it is unchill filtered, and you can trust them when they make that statement, because at Springbank they do not actually have a chill filtration machine. So I reckon there's more weight of integrity on the claim that they're making that they don't actually chill filter their whisky. So you might be wondering, what did they do instead, Ralphie? Well, what they do is they barrier filter. So rather than using what are effectively paper filters impregnated with some minerals and all stacked up like a concertina, they have a series of what are called coarse filters. In other words, a sieve. That's the way they do it. They've basically got a sieve system. And it means that whatever's created in that whisky during its maturation in the warehouse is retained far more successfully than if the whisky had been chill filtered. Springbank are noted for this. It's a very important component of their success. It's the actual preservation of the integrity of the delivery of the product. For people who are very occasional whisky consumers, they're not bothered, they're not interested, they just don't care. But for someone watching our Ralphie video in the Bothy, You do care. It's why you're here, because you know this review is going to go on at least another 15 minutes. So let's get stuck into it. On the nose, phenolic. Slightly syrupy phenolic, because there's been a lot of fresh cask maturation going on here. Sherry and a little bit of bourbon, because I'm getting some significant vanilla notes in the nose here as well. I also notice, and it kind of bewildered me when I first opened the bottle and had my first few sips, was there's a little bit of a red fruit, an indistinct red fruit nose. It's kind of half strawberry, cranberry, cherry thing going on. So I think that in this mix there's a little bit of either red wine casks or port casks. It's quite restrained on the nose initially. It's what you call a dense malt. And part of the reason is that when a whiskey's unchill filtered, and it's just barrier filtered, it tends to be slower to open up because the liquor is denser because of the retention of the fatty acids, the long chain proteins, and the integrity of that through the basic filtering. So it's slower to get going, but I assure you it's well worth the wait. Longrow is the peated version of Springbank. It very rarely features in this channel for a very simple reason. For many years now, it's been very hard to get hold of because of the demand by investors who, once they latched onto the fact that Springbank produced Longrow, which is the heavily peated version, as well as an unpeated version, triple distilled, called Hazelburn, then they basically bought up the bottles, so the availability wasn't that great, and it's compounded by the fact that Springbank is not a distillery that's expanding. It's got a certain size, which is small, and it sticks with it. This is one reason it's got a sister distillery next door called Kilkerran. The brand's called Kilkerran, the distillery is called Glengyle, and there's plans, of course, when they come up to celebrate their 200th anniversary as a distillery, which isn't that far away now, that they're going to build a third distillery to cope with the demand for natural, high quality, properly made whisky, because that demand is growing while the demand by the passive consumer for overpriced, even steeply discounted generic solutions in the form of Scotch single malt is tailing off quite a bit. It's the fact of it. First taste, neat at 57.1. It's a non-age statement whisky. We already know, we already can expect it to be a little bit rough. There's a tremendous heat in the first, excuse me a second, in the first sip. The first taste, neat, tells me immediately that all the cask activity has been very active, or highly active casks, and it's syruped up this whisky without actually making it sweet. That's encouraging. And furthermore, because of that, the peat isn't completely hitting you in the face. It's more restrained. To be honest, Longrow isn't as overtly phenolic. It's not a peat monster like other whiskies, for example, Ardbeg, Laphroaig, an obvious example. This one's just a little bit more, I would call it industrial restrained industrial note. So you get the carbolic, you get some mild iodine, but it doesn't have the forcefulness and directness of the Islay heavily peated whiskies. So at this point, At 57.1% alcohol, I'm getting a two-dimensional reading. Hence the reason I'm now going to add 1 teaspoon and a 2nd teaspoon. Yes, I know you think that's a lot of water. It's what I add because I want access. Simple as that. When I lift the glass, I'm seeing some great viscimmetry. I'm noticing, because it is natural colour, so we can get more honest readings from the natural colour, that there is a slight pinky hint to it, which suggests red port. Traditional red port influence in particular. It tends to be a wee bit more intense than you have with, say, a red wine, depending on the wine, of course, but generally that is the rule. As soon as I come back to nose it, far more articulate, literally in seconds, much more articulate. You know, I've only ever reviewed Longroad 4 times in this channel. 4 times ever. It's relatively hard to find, but if you do see a bottle, a plus point in its favour is that despite Springbank being an iconic and small distillery, they do put, certainly in the UK and Europe, they do put their basic core range bottlings out at a reasonable price. If you see this price hyped, so do your check on your mobile device. Always do your check, because you'll find in certain American liquor stores that the price, because of the brand name and association, is outrageously pumped up. When you see that, do not buy the whiskey, because you're basically getting fleeced. And we need to be smart. I intermittently give out warnings about this, but you need to get into the habit of doing cross-reference price checks online and find out which walk-in retailer is actually playing fair. And when you find them, stick with them. Give them the extra business. And let your online whisky community and your whisky club really know about it. Because unfortunately, and I see this in the UK, there are some, I wouldn't call them bad actors, I'd call them exploitative providers. And when they pump the price up, the distillery doesn't get a cut back on this. No chance. They're just plundering. Cheers. I've given this a few minutes. It's a young whisky. There is a lot of fresh cask activity, but not a lot of oak, because the liquor's not had time to get deeply into the oak to draw out from the wood the harder to get oak flavours. So its previous content, sherry, oloroso, most certainly. A little bit of bourbon, in my opinion, yes, and that little touch of port. Now in the nose, a little bit more interesting and aromatic. This isn't just a volcanic eruption anymore. This is more of a, how would I describe it? More of a prolonged fireworks show. You start to see the colours of the whisky, and I'm talking metaphorically as regards the flavour. The flavours simply become more articulate, and that's what we're looking for. This is why we sip single malts in a glass that allows us to nose it successfully. It's why we do it. And the result is quite rewarding, actually. The first thing I notice is not actually so much the flavour, but the complexity of the sensation range: sweet, sour, salt, bitter and savoury. They're all in there, and they're all restrained. If this had been chill filtered, they would have been downsized. They would have been diminished. And that's what makes this whisky interesting. It's not so much that it's a peat monster. As a peat monster, it's quite a generalist rather than specific, like a Laphroaig, for example. But what you get is the fundamental and hugely important benefit of the fact that it hasn't been put through a chill filtration machine with the chill switched off. which does far more downsizing of the event than people will ever care to admit. Honestly, if you can ever get to a bottling plant and actually see a chill filtration machine for it, for yourself, and even better, get someone to actually explain how it works, you will understand the aversion from experienced whisky people as to regards anything that has passed through a chill filtration machine. And unfortunately, it's not completely simple, because sometimes you get whiskies like Laphroaig that have been put through that device, but they've got the substance of character that they may remain relatively intact, and their uniqueness isn't totally undermined. It's just reduced. And this is something that, what's more important, the uniqueness of the character or the integrity of delivery, right? Because you've got uniqueness of character, but not as much as, say, Laphroaig and Ardbeg. But there again, you've got the integrity of the delivery, the honesty of the delivery, which Springbank, I confirm it because I've been in the bottling plant and I've seen for myself. But sometimes it's a balance, but generally, just basic barrier filtering. This is so important I mention this. This is why independent bottlings are so important. It's extremely rare you will see an independent bottling of Longrow. They are rare as hen's teeth. I've given this a few minutes. I've given this about 8 minutes now to open up, settle down. Let's go in for a deep dive. On the nose. Slightly crispy, appley phenolics. The phenolic is not as intense as you'll find in other heavily peated whiskies, even including Ardmore. It backs off. That's just the style of Longrow. It's a medium to heavily peated whisky. That's what it is. On the nose, slightly gingery, red fruit. The enhancement of that red fruit component really helps with the characterisation of it. And on the taste, first thing I notice, it's not even the flavour. It's the complexity of the sensations. You really struggle to unpick them. The sweet is there, but heavily sedated by the sour and bitter, which are flawlessly bonded together. And there is that delightful cold savoury note for a simple reason. All the kilning and peating of this whisky is done on site at the distillery, 100%. The finish, soft, intense, nippy, herbaceous, minty, quite, these strong mints that are quite intense. The old people that have lost their sense of flavour tend to eat, particularly when they're sitting and waiting in nursing homes. That sort of mintiness. It's almost bitter mint, very interesting. A lot of character going on here. It's not as heavily peated as it seems. The reason for that, I can't give you an explanation. It's really down to the provenance, which is the circumstance beyond explanation, full explanation. But I would say part of the diminishment of the phenolics is to do with the liberal use of the high energy first fill casks with previous content still in situ within the cask. It sort of kind of dampens down the exuberance of the peat. But with this, it's the sensation range. The flavour, sure, you've got intense peaty phenolic notes, but they're more generalist than specific in comparison to, say, Islay. This is a very different heavily peated whisky from Islay's. Totally different. If we got it as an independent bottling, it wouldn't really be that much difference. It would be single cask, relatively small batch. But the thing about Springbank, which is part of its reputation, is that it almost combines official and independent bottlings into one because of the integrity of their business model that they're using, which is working an absolute treat for them. Which is why you do not see bottles, anything from Springbank, on discount at the end of the year, come October and November, whereas there's other brands out there, the corporate brands, they're showing signs of desperation. But that's what you get when you're on a stock market model and you've got far too much influence in your brand from hedge funds, who allegedly are representing shareholders, supposedly. I'm going to wind things up in this. It's not one where I'd rush out to get another bottle. It's not like Laphroaig. Laphroaig is... I've got an awful lot of emotional baggage with the big hefty Laphroaigs. In fact, I'm going to discuss that in my extras, 1,130 extras coming along shortly. Just a side-by-side talk through between Longrow 100 proof and Laphroaig 10-year-old cask strength, because there's a lot that separates them, but they still kind of cover that same ground. And interestingly, you're probably wondering what happens when you blend them half and half, because it amazes me. I get nothing but positive feedback from my Patreon subscribers when I just do a little bit of casual glass blending, because it is so illustrative and so rewarding. And yet so many people are still frightened to do it because it's disrupting what the so-called master blender intended the product to be. But there again, the master blender didn't actually give you the money to buy the whiskey, did they? You've paid the money, you've paid the taxes, you've made the economic sacrifice to get the reward of what you've bought. You do with it as you choose. One request I do make is always show respect. When it gets to the stage that you get a lovely whiskey like this and you throw it in a tumbler with some soda water and a block of ice, put your bottles back in the shelf and just go and invest in the Dalmore or Macallan. Just please don't waste your time with genuine quality whiskies. Go for the big pompous brands. You'll be made very welcome there, particularly when you get your wallet out. Final commentary on that little acidic spout. Ooh, that was my little fireworks show there. The nose is far softer. Of course, I know. I've added two teaspoons of water. I have. I know that. But rather than diminishing the whiskey, is simply allowing the phenolic complexity to settle down and reveal a greater range of flavour from the glass. And the flavour is the combination of sensations and literal flavour. So grapefruit example, pineapple here. Fig. Red currant. Nice little red currant note. There's also something else here. A slight marzipan. I would call it linseed marzipan. Particularly in the latter half of the development when you go into the finish. The finish is fairly simple and intense and not a lot of tannins because the wood never got round to delivering them. It's too young for that. But a lovely, very shareable, simple, peat complex and unusual little whiskey, which I assure you is never a waste of time. Malt mark. $84 out of 100. There you have it. That's your malt mark. We'll see you soon for the extras. Hang about, is my camera lens steaming up? Everything's gone a little bit sort of steamy. That looks strange. I don't know what's going on. But it's kind of atmospheric, so I'm just going to let go. I'm just going to go with it. See you soon.